So I just thought I'd share some thoughts whilst I have my coffee this morning. I've just been thinking about the nature of the minds in a framework that I have created called the Five Orders of Existence. I would call this the fourth order, which is the self as a concept, conceptual self or propositional self. It's what some people might also call separate self or false self. But ultimately, for me, it is the idea of me that exists within a set of thoughts, beliefs. This idea about me, this is who I am, this is who I am not. And these are propositions, they're concepts. It's not the ultimate expression of what I is as a being and expression of life, but a set of ideas that I then identify with. And the very nature of the thinking mind is to propositionalize, which is to separate something that is whole into parts and pieces and to label. And one of the things that we can see in spiritual development, let's say, is somewhat of a rejection of that. Like the mind shouldn't do that. The thinking mind shouldn't do that. But that, in and of itself, is the mind that's saying the mind shouldn't do that. It's a further labeling that the mind shouldn't do that. So it's actually a continuation of the same thing because it exists within the same paradigm. It's still the mind conceptualizing and propositionalizing. I think we have to understand the reason the mind actually does break things down and can label things. And it's for an important adaptive role that really allowed for our proliferation and survival. Our ability to label something and then predict, this predictive processing in which it's called, would allow us to survive. If I can reliably predict my situation, something that's going to take place, if I can reliably predict that this place is safe, if I can reliably predict that this place leads to resources, to food, this helps ensure my survival. So to try to move beyond the idea of prediction is to try and move beyond hundreds and thousands of years of evolution. Rather than trying to move beyond it, I think what's important to understand is not that the ego has to die, not that the ego needs to be transcended, but it's to understand that the nature of the ego is a hypothesis and not truth. So when we have thoughts and we're making these predictions, if I can understand the nature of those things, that they are thoughts, that I am making a prediction, and that doesn't mean that is truth. In that case, if there is a prediction error, if it turns out that my prediction was incorrect, rather than having this reaction to it that many might do, which is to try to change the thing so it fits my prediction or avoid it, I can simply update my predictions with what's called a posterior. So the new belief then replaces the old one to go, that prediction was incorrect. Often what we do though is we eventually become blind and resistant towards updating our prior beliefs because we identify with them. So it's the identification, so it's existing in this fourth order paradigm where I believe I am my thoughts and beliefs, and I end up defending those and those positions as though they are me because I've now identified with them. From a higher order of existence, where I don't identify with my thoughts and beliefs, but I see them as emergent properties that arose to help our evolution, our survival, and were an adaptive part of what allowed our species to become what it is, I can view them in that way and know that I am something that exists in its totality far beyond the nature of thought. I am the one that allows for thought, not thought is what I am. From that place, I can hold my thoughts and beliefs more loosely, and my ability to predict, notice that there is an error in prediction, and then to update my belief will actually allow me to, one, survive much better because I'm not being resistant to what I think should be the case, but two, it really allows for a reduction of entropy and anxiety. Because when the thing doesn't happen that I think should, how many people then feel high amounts of stress, anxiety? There's a relationship between them and life where they're saying, what has happened shouldn't have done. It's not that my prediction was wrong, it's that life is wrong. So there's actually a relationality between the self and life that is kind of putting the horse before the cart. It thinks that life should fit its predictions rather than making predictions, and if it turns out to be incorrect, to update its belief about reality. When we can do that, we actually allow ourselves to really evolve so much more. And I think for that to happen, there are two meta virtues that really need to be cultivated. One is humility. The humility to understand that I'm a finite being in relation to the infinite that is all around me, and that I can't possibly predict all of it. It's pretty reasonable when we say it like that. So the humility to be okay with that. And two, I think the faith, having faith in a benevolent universe that actually is unfolding and acting in a way that goes way beyond my understanding, that actually allows for my survival. And I think one of the good places for people to kind of begin with that, and to really feel that and know that, I just realised I'm having my coffee and didn't have any coffee, is in the body. Very often we could try to go out there, but just go in the body and just consider how much is going on in my body right now that I know nothing about propositionally. I have no propositional understanding of what is happening in my body, and yet it's all working seamlessly. If we understand just really what is taking place in myself, and again, we can't, like science is continuously discovering more and more to try to give proposition to what is, regardless if we can give it conceptual understanding or we can propositionalize it. It always is. So within one cell of the body, there is 3 billion base pairs of DNA, which carries the amount of genetic code that, if written into books, would fill 700 300-page books. Now, if we take every cell in the body and wrote that into books, it would fill 21 quadrillion books, which, if stacked on top of each other, would reach 331 billion miles into space, which is 90 times further than Pluto. That's what's happening in just this one body. And I have no idea about it. So if I can just connect to that, I can see how futile my thoughts are for the majority of what is taking place in order for me to be alive. And then my thoughts just account for 0.0001%. And that's not to say that that amount isn't important. It is. And making accurate predictions is important. Absolutely. It really is. So it's not to nominalize that or to reduce it to nothing. It's something. But if I can hold it in correct proportion to what it is and understand there is so much always taking place that I don't need to know or predict, I can maybe then soften. I can soften into faith that life is always happening whether I understand or know or predict it. And then actually, there are just a few things that if I'm able to predict is helpful. And it is helpful. But because our capacity to predict as a species really allowed for our evolution and proliferation, I think it then becomes maladaptive to the point where we are overly predicting. And then when we predict, if we try to predict too much, because ultimately we can't, it starts to create this feeling of overwhelm. We feel overwhelmed by trying to predict too much. And if there's uncertainty around the prediction, it creates entropy, and entropy and our ability to compute entropy is related to anxiety. So rather than trying to stop the predictions, which really is presence, and we can balance it out with presence, just be aware that there is a function here that serves us well. But if we try to make that our primary mode of existence, it becomes maladaptive. Just like if we inhale only and we don't exhale, we're going to have an issue. So that's just a thought for this morning. Something to be with. The conceptual mind often dichotomizes and dichotomy pathologizes, and pathology further dichotomizes. And it ensues this loop of being in the mind, of creating separation. And again, very often in the spiritual space or the self-help space, we see the mind then gets pathologized and split off from the whole. But it's all part of everything. And the mind, the nature of the mind is to split the thinking minds. And that's okay. That serves in particular ways. But we need to be involved in practices where we can put down propositional thinking and enter into a non-propositional space within, where I become aware of my wholeness, where I become aware of my aliveness, where I become aware of my existence beyond propositional thought. I become aware of my essence, that place within me that has always existed, that existed before thought. It is the place in which thought emerged from. And it's the place I can always return to. That feels extremely peaceful. Because it goes beyond, or sits beneath thought. There's no right, there's no wrong, it just is. And in this place of essence, I become aware of my essential nature, that is peace. And when I realize that this is what I am, that sits beneath, it's the ground of being beneath the idea of who I am, the proposition and the concepts. What we need is a contact epistemology, which means we know through being in contact with. It's a participatory knowing. So that's really the importance of an ecology of practices that actually affords us to know, not through the mind. Again, this is our dominant understanding of knowing now, is through thought, but we have types of knowing which really feel way more real than the idea of thought. If you get into a warm bath, You know the warmth, the sensation, the feeling and the relaxation of the warmth of that bath so much more than the idea that you can express speaking about it through thoughts. Same as laughter. I can try and explain the proposition of laughter, but that is not the same as laughing. So all of this said, when we understand the nature of the thinking mind, we can not demonize it, but understand that it is an emergent property that has served us exceptionally well, and that if we get lost in it, it can become maladaptive. Too much of anything is maladaptive. And then finally, to allow ourselves to actually find practices that take us into that place of knowing beyond thought, where we can experience deep peace, and it's the peace that always is there. It's always there to return to. Essence. And this is the name of the 16-week process that I'm just launching. It's a real deep breakdown of philosophy, of existential philosophy, phenomenology, ontology, epistemology, how we know what we know. We look at cognitive science, neuroscience, evolutionary biology, psychology, and then we go all the way through to spirituality, the spiritual practice, and even mysticism. How do we actually have these direct experiences of union with the divine and sacred, and how do I know that within me? And that's the nature of the program, and it's not to split off any part. Again, not to dichotomize science from spirituality, not to dichotomize the understanding of the parts with mysticism. All of this exists within one greater whole. And so many of the things that have been given to us as frameworks to, transcend the thinking mind really exist within it. And we're given narratives and stories to try to move out of old ones, and those other narratives and stories really don't afford a deep sense of meaning and existential resilience and coherence and belonging. So the nature of this program is to really deconstruct a lot of the things that we've been living in that don't allow us to afford the deep peace and truth that already exists within us. Once we deconstruct them, is to take a deeper dive and look into the nature of reality itself, to explain existence with more coherence, with more understanding that actually makes sense, not just within our mind, but within our body, to understand the nature of ourselves, of our psyche, and to understand a relational ontology, to understand that all the parts within ourselves are relating, and all of those things relate to reality, and the understanding of reality and the understanding of ourselves and how those two things relate allow for what's called a psycho-ontology. And the deeper understanding we have of both of those and how reality is actually working, we can start to create a framework for transcendence, for self-transcendence, to transcend beyond the existing propositions of self that afford more coherence, more connectedness, more belonging, more resilience. And then finally, from that, we can begin to cultivate more virtues. So we're not just understanding insights, but then our experience of life is still very turbulent. I'm cultivating the virtues that actually afford me the ability to live in alignment with those insights. There is an insight, and then I conform, share form with the insight. And what allows me to share form with the insight is the virtues and the character traits. Otherwise, we just have insight, and then we'll just carry on living as we were. So all of that is in this 16-week program. I'm not even sure what to call it. Call it a program. It feels more like a process and a deep dive into what it is to be human, to navigate reality. And it's not the promise that we become or fulfill potential, but it's actually a return to what's always been. It's a return to our essence. If any of this calls to you and you'd like to learn more, I'm going to put a link in this video so you can watch a little bit more. And if you feel called to take part in this, you can arrange a call with me, and it won't be a sales call. I'm not a salesperson. It'll be a time and opportunity for us to connect, to find out where you are in your own journey right now, and to see if this work is for you. I will say it's not for everyone. This isn't entry level, and it's not the kind of thing that's going to promote you to become the best version of you, to get more things in your life. It isn't that. It's not bypassing. It's not fluffy. We go really deep. I would say this is aimed at the kind of person that's had success in their life, that has discovered that success wasn't the key to fulfillment, that has tried to now find a deeper sense of meaning. You've done meditation, you've done the practices, you've read the books, you've maybe even done the retreats and the plant medicines, which are all sacred, but you still haven't landed in that deep place of belonging within your own body. If that's you, I would say we have to go deeper to a philosophy that gives a phenomenological understanding of your experience that actually makes sense, and that actually reorients the way in which you view life itself and yourself in a way that affords meaning, understanding, and coherence. That's who it's for. So if you're someone that appreciates going deeper and having a deeper understanding, you've had enough of the things and the frameworks that might have been presented to you that actually aren't allowing you to experience life in a way in which fundamentally you think you should. And by the way, you're right to feel that. You're right to feel that. You've just not yet found that thing. I think this is for you. It's not just for the intellectuals, but if you are intellectual, but you're also seeking a deeper sense of connection, I think this will call to you a lot. Also, if you are someone who is deeply devoted to a spiritual practice, I believe this will also call to you. This isn't just about propositions. This is about affording an understanding of reality where we can deepen into a divine union with the all that is. This is the purpose of the perennial teachings in religion, religare, to reconnect. If you feel this, you can tap the link in the description, watch the short video there, schedule a call, connect, see if it's for you. And if so, it'll be my delight to be a part of helping guide this journey. All right, that's it for today. Much love. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. If you're still here right now, I'd love it if you could like this video. Leave a little comment. Let me know what came alive in you in this. None of this was planned or scripted. I actually have no idea what I've just said. So it'll be interesting to watch it back. Hopefully it made some sense and offered some type of understanding or insight that might provoke some further reflection. All right, much love. I hope you have a wonderful day.